Okay, I welcome you back from our little break. We have to be punctual now with this next session. It is the cluster, the Global Humanitarian Cluster, mirror session number 2. And as you have seen, there is a new setting. The two guests have chosen to engage in a dialogue. And who are the two guests? It is Madame Josephine Ippe from the Global Nutrition Cluster. She's the coordinator of the Global Nutrition Cluster with UNICEF. She's coming from Uganda. Uganda is a very active partner also in our board. Your former water minister, Maria Mutagamba, now tourism minister, she's a very active member of our advisory board, so I will meet her next week. Then we have Dr. Jean Lapegue. He is from the WASH cluster, strategic advisor, from the strategic advisory group in the Action contre la faim. I leave it now up to you. It looks as if you are used to such dialogues. Maybe you have trained already in the French television. That's how it looks. Yeah. So have an interesting talk, and we are good and interesting listeners.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it will be my second life, maybe at the French television. So I'm very happy to be here and to be here with Josephine. By the way, we know each other since 2011. But we didn't work a lot together, and I think this summarizes a little the interest of this type of meeting. We know each other, our clusters know each other, both clusters are connected to health sector, but we didn't really interact together, and we want to change that, and that's why we are here. We are representing the humanitarian sector. The debates this morning were a lot about development, including the debates about chronic undernutrition. But inside this big development issue, we've got a humanitarian issue which is extremely serious. You've got 310 million people affected every year by crisis. And around half of them is affected by conflicts, and the other half is affected by natural disasters. And last year, 76 million people asked for humanitarian assistance. And Josephine will tell you that the concern in terms of undernutrition in conflict areas is growing. So that's why we are here. It's a very challenging, the humanitarian context is very challenging because on one hand, it seems to be very fast, very direct. On the other hand, you've got some figures. For example, the average duration of a camp last year was 17 years. Okay, so intervening in humanitarian context doesn't mean that you are going to enter one day and to get out after 3 weeks. Sometimes you will stay for 20 years, like we do, for example, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, etc. So I'm here to represent the Global WASH cluster. I'm not the Global WASH cluster coordinator, still, maybe one day. But basically, I exchange with the Global cluster. But maybe the first thing to tell you is what means a Global cluster. What is a cluster? The cluster have been created in 2006 as part of the humanitarian reform. And it was a way to improve the coordination of the sector for emergency setting. There is a coordination in WASH, as much as in nutrition, but the humanitarian reform felt that there was a need to improve that for emergency. And we created the cluster. So a cluster is a coordination group which have a normative dimension and an operational dimension. At the global level, so basically we've got this coordination platform at the global level based in Geneva. And this platform, the aim of this platform is to define policies to support the national platforms to develop advocacy, to anticipate the crisis, like to do preparedness. And the global mandate is basically to be more proactive, more efficient, and more effective, and also more accountable to suffering populations. In the WASH cluster is quite a small cluster. We've got 50 members, around 50 members. There are 3 German organizations. One is THW, which is a governmental organization, and then we've got 2 NGOs, Arch-Noah and Welthungerhilfe. So it's very limited number, and I use the fact that I'm here on the panel to promote and to engage German organizations to join the cluster. For us, the German government and Germany is a model in a lot of ways. When you look about the funding for nutrition, for example, when you look about the dynamism, it's very appealing country. The work you are doing with migrants is absolutely fantastic, and it's an example for us. And we would like now to have some German organization joining the WASH cluster. We would like also to have the German donors joining the WASH cluster. In terms of governance, the cluster is coordinated by a cluster coordinator, and then there is a strategic group. I'm a member of this strategic group for the WASH cluster, and the strategic group has a role of supporting and defining the strategy of the overall coordination. And then after, you've got members, which are both represented at global level and at country level. The whole strategy of the cluster is turned to the countries. We are not a sort of, sphere somewhere in Geneva thinking. We are not a think tank. We are here to support the country level. And very practically, we do that with different pillars. One pillar is the search capacity. For example, between 2012 and 2015, we have supported the country level with 58 emergency deployments. We have also a dimension about preparedness. I said that the mandate of the cluster is also to ensure predictability. We know that there are recurrent crises. We know that the climate change is making the crisis much more recurrent. And basically, we can sometimes anticipate the humanitarian situations. And so basically, there is also this dimension in the strategy of the cluster. It's a very interesting moment for the clusters today because we end up with a strategic process, and I believe it's the same, Josephine, for your cluster, but the first big strategic process is just finishing this year. And now we are going to engage in a new strategic planning for the next 3 years. This new strategic planning is not yet written. We are going to have a consultant at the beginning of the year to do that. And I believe that if we manage to discuss together, we may have some reflexivity between the NUT and the WASH clusters in this strategic process. And something else where we can meet is that so the global clusters meet every year, once a year, in different countries. And for example, we were in Nairobi 3 weeks ago, and we managed not to discuss together. But there are some opportunities in the agenda for the two clusters to communicate. I'm going to conclude on the WASH sector by telling what are our concerns today from a humanitarian point of view. We've got one concern with natural disasters. You know that natural disasters are increasing, especially due to climate change, but also to the fact that the population is increasing. So the vulnerability is globally increasing. We've got a concern with public health, and we saw it very clearly with the Ebola crisis in the last years. These type of crises are going to repeat themselves, unfortunately. And the climate sometimes is part of this game. we've got a major problem with the conflicts, and to be more specific, with the urban conflicts. And the work sector doesn't really know how to deal with urban conflicts. It's already quite difficult to work in a conflict area, but to apply that to an urban center is extremely complex, and we need to learn together on that. Then after, there is the dimension of displaced people. And indeed, there is a concern in Europe these days with displaced people, but you've got a major issue of displacement in the Middle East region, for example, or in Sub-Saharan Africa this time, and we also intervene there, so we need to work there. And finally, there is a challenge about human resource and about information. It's extremely challenging. We've got more and more emergencies. We are facing more and more emergencies, and for each emergency, we need to deliver support, to deliver a proper coordination, and to ensure a proper information. In emergency response, information is a critical need. So I would say, if I had to summarize a little what are our needs from the WASH sector point of view, this would be our main needs. Thank you. You've got yours.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Jean. What I would do is try as much as possible not to repeat what you said about the structure, how clusters are organized. But I would also then just talk about practically what are the opportunities for WASH and nutrition to work together in a humanitarian setting. I would also then say what is currently preventing us from not really achieving that, and then a few actions that we need to take together to make this work. But I would maybe first just start by complimenting what Jean said regarding, the purpose of the clusters at global and country level. Clusters are created in a humanitarian setting, and a number of you, I'm sure, like you, me, have been in many emergencies in your lifetime or have heard about it. If you cast your mind back to the times of tsunami and the Congo, and also early days maybe of the Bahr al-Ghazal crisis and so on, I think those are the big emergencies that gave us a wake-up call in terms of the fact that we all rush into this emergency trying to do good, but we are stepping on each other's feet and not really coordinating. So clusters were created then to help us to coordinate strategically, but also our response should be coherent, adequate, and to scale. Yeah. So it's on the basis of that clusters are created. And as Jean said, at global level, we really organize ourselves in such a way that we are there to support country clusters in implementing coordinated response. And we do that through normative aspect, but also really supporting their 6 core functions for clusters at country level, and that's how we organize ourselves at global level to support. And these are supporting service delivery, ensuring there's no duplication, there is a clarity in terms of who is doing what, where, and so on. We also are there to inform the strategic decision-making of the humanitarian country team, and thirdly, planning and strategic planning, so that our strategies or our response plan of the collective is done in such a way that we complement each other. Similarly, the advocacy piece, which Jean mentioned, monitoring, reporting, but also contingency planning and preparedness. So at global level, we organize ourselves to deliver those services. And to do that, we have both WASH and nutrition are in a similar situation in terms of our structure. We have, at global level, we have focus on coordination, partnership, and also better communication with our global partners. The second aspect of what we do is strengthening the capacity of the individuals who coordinate, cluster coordinators and information managers, so that they have the skill set to do a better job. The third component is more operational and such support to countries. Yeah, and the he gave example of how we deploy in the middle of emergencies and what our support is. The third component is around information and knowledge management, but also, research where it's possible. Now, coming to nutrition specifically, I must admit that I was so thrilled when I had the invitation to this meeting. The reason is, in nutrition, we say nutrition is an outcome indicator. There are factors that affect it, and WASH is one of them. We have food security, we have issues around social care practices, and then we have access to health, water, and sanitation. And it's for this reason that for us in nutrition, it's not by choice that we have to walk by, we have to, because WASH is one of the factors that affect what we do. And within that, I would also like to emphasize that as nutritionists, we are very good at running around and doing our intervention, which are nutrition specific, like treatment of severe acute malnutrition, micronutrients deficiency control, infant and young child feeding, and fortification, and all those other aspects. But what we are not good at is the nutrition sensitive intervention. And within that, you have the input that can come from WASH, health, and food security. So with that, then I would go straight to then, why is it not working? Because as Lauren said, the Lancet series 2013 has clearly defined what are those nutrition-sensitive interventions. So we should actually be linking with all of you and just run with it. But I think the question is the how. And this is what each and every partner on the ground and the cluster coordinators want us to do. In terms of nutrition, I would say if you look at the context that we deal with, there are three types. The protracted, where you have the Syria, Ukraine, you have CAR, Somalia, South Sudan, emergencies that have been there for years. Yeah, and the situation that has been explained here is the same. The only difference is it's escalated. The need is more. The conditions are worse. And therefore, the starting, the base is bad already. And then because of the humanitarian crisis, it's even worse. And then we have sudden onset, like Nepal, Philippines, Pakistan, and Haiti during the earthquake. And then we have situations where the food insecurity or crisis is gradually contributing to deterioration, and we have to have a watch on that. So with that kind of context, then what do we need to do to make sure that these linkages are there? I would say that for us, the starting point is there's a lot of work that has been done through the Lancet series. Within UNICEF, there are frameworks for WASH and nutrition and how we should work together. So there's already a lot existing, and we need to capitalize on that. The second aspect is the package of intervention that needs to be implemented to make our response, the response of WASH, nutrition sensitive, is already there. So it's basically taking that and trying to ensure that we support countries to implement that. The third component is the funding. Much as we could say, well, you know, your intervention in your sectors could be nutrition sensitive, but if there's no funding put on it, and if there's no proper linkages in terms of real integration where we could be in the same place using nutrition indicators as maybe a targeting model, we would fail. And then the third component is the accountability. Like, how do we hold ourselves accountable so that we deliver and monitor some of these interventions we talk about? And finally, maybe I would end up with a few of the challenges which, in our view, are the following. Joint and intersectoral assessment still remains a big gap. And this is an area, because without that, you will not be able to have a good program that is based on the situation. The second aspect is the strategic response planning process. We really need to focus more on integration and how that looked like, and then leadership around that. And finally, the costing of it and also monitoring of the response. And I would then end by saying, with all that, we have a number of good examples in the Sahel where WASH and nutrition work together. They developed a strategy and clearly outlined what needs to be done. We have good examples in Somalia during the famine, the Somalia famine. So there's a lot that we could build on from. And to do that, I would then end by saying, in my view, this is what needs to be done to make this happen. One is the existing regional framework or the document that somebody said is going to be launched in New York. And the few country examples, already these are examples that we can adopt as a framework to support our countries to work in. And then there are a number of these package of intervention which we could, we need to just find out how best we could do that. And then finally, there is, it's not just a question of articulating what needs to be done, but also the monitoring and the reporting. I think we all know that it's something to say, it's one thing to say we'll do something about it, but if you don't monitor it, you don't report on it, then, you can never learn and improve. And finally, I will add by saying that if you look around in this forum, there are a number of us who are from the humanitarian world, and I'm so happy that I've been invited. But I work with a different group of people. None of them are here, except maybe for Jean and myself, and who else is there? Maybe Jeremy and a few other people. So how do we bridge this gap? Because we could continue talking about all this, but without that, nothing would happen. And finally, I would also like to, to end by saying within our various organizations, it starts right there. You would maybe have me focusing on humanitarian coordination. There's somebody in UNICEF focusing on development, all UNICEF, and then there's another person focusing on humanitarian. So how do we start that linkage right from our respective organizations? Because the guidance are there, the frameworks are there. It's just the question of how. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Josephine, for that. Indeed, when we look at the two clusters, we realize that both of them are under the same leading agency, which is UNICEF. Both of them have got the same structure, with a coordination group, with a strategic advisory group, and with members. Both of them have got a strategy. Both of them are implementing the same 6 functions of coordination on the ground. Both of them have got a need in terms of visibility and funding, because we were speaking this morning about the percentage of the ODA applicable to WASH sector. It's 6.5%, but in terms of emergency funding, it's even less. It's 4%. So, and nutrition is not much better. So we've got a common advocacy topic here. Both of the clusters are also responding to the same appeals. The humanitarian appeal in emergency situation, the consolidated appeals are going through the same processes. Both organizations are using the same assessment formats, like the MIRA, like the 3W. So you've got some bizarre acronyms just to describe assessment formats, and we are using the same one. Both organizations are answering to the same accountability financial mechanism, which is the financial tracking system of OCHA, UNOCHA. So there is a real ground to build something together. If we start to think what could we do together, I would say that the first thing that we are doing is that we are learning one from the other. For example, I know that the nutrition cluster has got a membership. I mean, each of your members has got a sort of commitment to the cluster. We don't have that in the WASH cluster, and we want to implement it. We know also that you are, because we've got some little spies, we know also that your governance mechanism is working much better than our governance. So we would like to learn from you. And maybe you can learn from us about preparedness. The WASH cluster has been the first one to work at regional level on preparedness to anticipate the crisis. So I think there is a room for learning. This is something very important that we can, and we can highlight that. The second room, I think, is we should maybe close the session by writing a sort of joint commitment, a sort of joint strategic commitment. So I will not write it because I'm not the WASH cluster coordinator, but I will strongly recommend to my colleague Dominique Porto to have a statement saying that because WASH and nutrition are absolutely intricated together, both for development but also for emergency setting, we need to commit together strategically. I think that this is something very important. And if we've got this sort of strategic statement, the other things will naturally get out of that.
Just again to complement, I really feel, for me, I look at the humanitarian setting and the way we are currently organized as an opportunity to really realize the WASH and nutrition linkage. Because, as Jean said, we have a good structure for how assessments are done, how response is planned, and ideally, under the humanitarian coordinator, there's supposed to be one overarching strategic objective that each and every sector contributes to. There is also then, thereafter, each sector goes and articulate what it is that is going to do to contribute to this. And then there is also joint funding stream, which then makes it easy to realize the activities that we said we are going to do together. So I think the opportunity is there to really, in an emergency setting, to realize this. The second opportunity, or what I would maybe throw to the few donors who are in the audience, is that how do I put this in the way where it is, yeah, all right, I'll do it anyway. I think, there's an opportunity here for the donors really to put the pressure that is required on the partners, on the cluster lead agencies to make this happen. I know that years ago when the donors said, well, we need to ensure that mainstreaming of gender is an important integral part of what we do. It was done, So I really think there is an opportunity here. With now the Lancet series, we know what works and what, and all this other evidence which have been shown this morning. There's so much that can be realized. And also putting then the money where it really matters and making sure that we report on it. We tell you how it is working. And finally, I would also say that currently the strategic plan, if you go on the OCHA website, you look at all the humanitarian response, the overall strategic plan, the sector plans, and so on. It would include all those things. I can assure you it would. But do we really do it? Is the question. People are the partners and everybody being made accountable to ensure that they deliver and they report on it. Are we putting the money to the right activities which we collectively say would make an impact? So for me, I really see the work of the humanitarian being, the opportunity that, where everybody comes together, things are being done together. And finally, also, really, with all these initiatives, I know I mentioned to Lawrence a few, was it 6 months ago when the Global Nutrition Report was launched, and I'm like, guys, where is the humanitarian analysis in this report? And yes, there's this big, it's like this room, you know, there's this group here and the other one there, and we don't talk, but there's so much we could do together. And if you look at the programs, the activities that we are talking about is the same one. The only difference is maybe the population is different, hygiene promotion and sanitation maybe. Yeah, maybe it might not be flush toilet, but it will be improved whatsoever toilet. You know, so I really see the opportunity here, and finally, I must admit that I'm so grateful that we were invited here. I was so grateful that we are now being systematically invited to the SUN meetings, scaling up nutrition meetings, where we could push the link between humanitarian and development. And I really think every setting should do this, and I commend all the organizers for this, for making us, inviting us and being here to share with you the little experience we have. So with that, I would say thank you so much. I don't know whether there are questions or how it's going to be. Yeah, but thank you so much. Yeah.
Maybe just before opening the floor for questions, I think that what we need to think about, Josephine, is so we want to take commitments, global commitments, but we want also to be sure that these commitments are going to touch the ground and are going to be translated, as you say, at the humanitarian country team, at the field level. So we need to explore a way to do that. There are many ways. One way can be just capacity building of the agencies that form the global WASH cluster or the global nutrition cluster. But also we can work on the, on the national strategies, on the term of reference of the humanitarian country team, to be sure that the health, because basically WASH and nutrition, it's public health. So we are really on the same page. We need to make it happen at the country level. This is a serious game. The WASH cluster at the moment is active in 25 countries. So, and I don't know how many countries you're active in, but basically we speak of about 25 countries or 30 countries where we need to make it happen.
Well, thanks a lot. Listening to your agreement that this is an opportunity to go from here further hand in hand, I think it was already worthwhile that we came to Bonn to see that people who have all along known each other and know of each other now coming here and agreeing here to strengthen the relation and their cooperation. This is exactly why we are here. And so this is already a very first, very good result. Now, not coming from the humanitarian corner, so to say, I asked myself if I can start with the first question, and then, of course, you are invited to join with other questions and comments. It was almost at the end that OCHA was mentioned. I asked myself, how come that the Global Humanitarian Cluster, the coordinator is in UNICEF? This already triggered questions, which structures in the UN are dealing with humanitarian aid. Then the question, do your cluster relate directly to donors, which in Germany the major donor would be the foreign ministry, or who are their interlocutors? Yeah, is it UNICEF or is it OCHA or who is it, or is it Action contre la faim? Yeah. So it's for me it's not really clear. Okay, I leave it with this and. Maybe while you are thinking about the answers, I want to invite you for 2 more questions, and then we make another round. Okay, so here and the gentleman.
Who's first?
The lady. Well, we have. Okay, we also can do 3 questions.
Thank you. Yeah. Lotte Feuerstein from the Water Integrity Network. I was a bit surprised. Maybe it's because we are talking about this specific cluster mechanism, which to many of us is maybe also not so known, and it's a very specific type how it's coordinated. But we sort of always say, yeah, well, at the outcome level, it's all super interlinked. Topically, it's very interlinked. But when we talk about the concrete action, we end up with how we can learn about each other's governance, how we can learn about, organizational issues, which could work even without having a thematic link itself. So my question is, if we cut down to the topic, maybe if you can tell us, for example, in humanitarian settings, the WASH interventions, what are the 3 things we need to do to make them nutrition sensitive?
Well, then the gentleman, sorry that the lady was given the micro, but here was a gentleman from South Sudan, who would be the 3rd one. So first, this gentleman.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jeremy Shoham from the Emergency Nutrition Network. I'm glad you asked that question, because I was going to make some suggestions, because one of the things I feel in this discussion so far is that we talked about political commitment, if you like, for WASH and nutrition to talk to each other. And we've heard about the Lancet series on nutrition-specific interventions, but in actual fact, very little of that series deals with the humanitarian context. And as coming from the nutrition community as I do, the question is, okay, how can we make nutrition more WASH-sensitive and vice versa? So I've been thinking about that all morning, really. What are the areas? And there are specific areas, and I wonder if this is where we really need to get to. We really need to get to the detail. So, for example, a key issue for nutrition in humanitarian contexts is infant feeding. It's whether to support activities which encourage exclusive breastfeeding rather than donations of formula milk leading to artificial feeding. And a key determinant of that is an assessment of the WASH context. And there are various thresholds and guidelines on that. And the nutrition cluster needs to work with the WASH cluster to have that assessment made to develop a policy in any given context about breastfeeding and bottle feeding. That's a key aspect of humanitarian programming. Another way you can link nutrition and WASH is if you have a CMAM program, a program set up to treat moderately and severely wasted children. Now, you could argue that those are exactly the households you should be giving hygiene messages to. And a third area, you asked for 3 examples, would be actually something that WASH can do, because WASH have the same objectives, really, as the nutrition sector. It's health objectives, to prevent mortality. So really, something that WASH could do would be to liaise or link with the nutrition sector around their nutrition surveys, to try and influence them, the surveys, so that they can pinpoint which are the geographically or community or populations which are particularly suffering from malnutrition, and target their WASH interventions there, first of all. One last thing. I know I've taken...
Otherwise, we have no chance.
Okay, fine.
Nobody else has a
I will
chance.
stop. Thank you.
There are other chances today and tomorrow, yeah? So the very last question, the gentleman here.
Yeah, Peter Mahal from the South Sudan Ministry of Electricity, Dam Irrigation and Water Resources. My question is, as you have started within this very good forum organized by the WASH German toilet, and I wanted to exactly go back to the interlink that you are already now creating between the WASH and nutrition, and I'm sure they are all under umbrella of UNICEF support. How sustainable now it is? You are starting to have a communication, which is very meaningful. How sustainable it is without linking right away the planning with the in-country governments?
Okay, thank you. We had only, okay, because this gentleman must go to the airport.
We are going to share the answers, but first thing is I can answer to your question, Peter. The role of the clusters and the role of the lead agency is to support the governments. Okay, the role of the United Nations agencies is to support the governments. Basically, all the governments are part of the cluster. And we met in Nairobi a couple of weeks ago, and we had the pleasure to have many people from the country governments invited to the global cluster meeting. So there is no disconnection between the government and the cluster, because the role of the cluster is to support the institutions, when there are institutions, of course.
Thank you so much for these, useful comments. One, to start with your question regarding the role of OCHA and the coordination. I think maybe I had actually made a presentation, but I decided maybe we should just talk through stuff. And a number of what you have asked for is there, and maybe what will be useful is if this could be given, shared.
Yeah.
But I'll still all the same respond to your questions. One is the role of OCHA. No, clusters are structured under the OCHA coordination framework. It is. What we are talking about in terms of our level is within OCHA there is an overall global level but country level coordination structure. What we were reporting about is more the, clusters are sectors, wash, health, nutrition, and so on. So at global level, what was decided was that there should be a lead agency to to be accountable for the overall coordination. So for health is WHO. Okay. For nutrition is UNICEF, WASH is UNICEF, and education is co-chair. So there are 11 clusters like that. So the structure we are defining is more under that umbrella, but there's an overarching coordination mechanism with OCHA, and even at country level is the same. So I hope that answers that question. The second issue is more the relationship with the donors. We, at both global and country level, the key donors are members of the, observers in some cases, and in some cases they are members. And our discussion, whether it's at strategic level or country operational, we have a lot of donor update and rather input. In fact, the donor focal points in the clusters are the technical ones. Yeah, so there's that interaction already with the donors when it comes to prioritization and so on. The third question was about concrete actions. I must admit that it's not just here that we started talking. We have, in a number of emergencies, we have similar structures on intercluster coordination. And I gave the example of the Sahel Wash and Nutrition Framework, which we could share, and the Somalia experience, where there's a framework that is developed which articulates, based on the situation, what are the actions that needs to be taken. But when we talk of concrete actions that, Jamie, you referred to, indeed, they are, under the various nutrition-specific interventions, but also concrete sensitive interventions, we have articulated clearly what are those actions that needs to be taken, and if they are taken, then, nutrition would be made, or wash would be made nutrition sensitive. And the example you gave in terms of management of acute malnutrition, making sure that in the health facilities there's access to clean water, sanitation, and so on at community level, using nutrition indicators to actually drive the targeting. And within that, then aspects of improved water, sanitation, promotion of hand washing, and so on. In terms of infant and young child feeding, making sure that, that linkage is strong, but also the promotion of breastfeeding and reduction or, ensuring that if breast milk substitute is to be used, it is used appropriately in a sanitary manner and so on and so forth. So we have those examples, but I think overall the suggestions that we are giving was more overarching because we thought the first presentation And the second one kind of articulated the nutrition-sensitive intervention and the nutrition-specific interventions. So it's for that reason that we didn't specify. And yeah. Do you want to?
Yes. On donors, we have the pleasure to have Trevor White here in the room. He's a donor of the WASH sector. So basically our two key donors are OFDA, so the American government, and ECHO. And then we've got country donors also, like Sweden, Norway, etc. We would be very happy to have Germany. Maybe, Trevor, you want to say something about, from your donor perspective, how do you see this coordination body?
Is this working?
Yeah.
I think humanitarian donors have been engaged with the humanitarian reform process, as Jean described, starting from 2006, and engaged in the creation of the cluster system.
Hello.
I think most humanitarian donors are very supportive of the cluster system.
Wir sind noch nicht online, es ist nur der Test.
Improving coordination in emergencies.
Schalten Sie Ihr Video an.
It was identified through many emergencies in the past that coordination was a problem. There still are a lot of challenges within that system. There's a tendency to have siloed sectors, and I think that's what this discussion here is quite a bit about, is trying to break down those silos between the
Ich habe
sectors.
noch kein Bild von Ihnen.
There's still a lot of debate about how successful the cluster system has been. I think there's still discussion, I think, amongst donors and others about, is there a different system that could be better than the cluster system, or is there ways to strengthen the cluster system and make it work better? But I think these are all things that are being discussed kind of at a very high level amongst different donors. Myself personally in the WASH sector, I've had a very great relationship with the WASH cluster, and I know my nutrition colleagues at OFDA have had very good interactions with the nutrition cluster.
Sie haben jetzt auch ein Bild.
Both at the
Ja,
global
Sie haben auch ein
level
Bild.
and
Okay, das ist ja
country
schön.
level.
Wir haben es noch hingekriegt mit dem
Thank you
Bild.
very much. I can see that there are still
Bleiben Sie
many
einfach dran.
questions open, but
Sobald Sie
there are also
anmoderiert werden,
which I
schalten wir Sie dann
could not
durch.
now
Und
allow
bis
to
dahin
be,
kann man Sie auch noch nicht hören und noch nicht
here.
sehen.
I just
Alles klar.
draw your
Vielen Dank.
attention to the
Bis gleich.
workshop session number 4, where you can, with more intensity, continue to discuss. I thank you wholeheartedly. Thanks a lot for sharing your, the strengths and the weaknesses of so far cooperation. We have to stop now because we have to get a telephone connection, because our next speaker couldn't make it because her plane was cancelled. So, well, thank you very much, and you have a good flight. Yeah?